Today we're going to be talking about finding domain, range, x and y intercepts of all different kinds of functions. So off to the side we have a definition for a function, and it just says a function is a special relationship between variables where each output has a single input. And if you can remember, input means x numbers and output means y numbers. Now, instead of using input and output, as we get older, we have fancier words, and those words are going to be domain and range. Domain is going to be like our inputs, where domain is the x numbers. And when we write our answer, we are going to write it from left side of the graph to the right side of the graph. And then our output is considered the same thing as range. So range is the y numbers. And we're going to write our answer from the bottom of the graph to the top of the graph. Now, to help us write an answer, if I go over here to the other side, we have to talk about different notations that we're going to use. So we're going to use parentheses around it if there happens to be an open circle on the graph, or if you're touching an arrow. And when we write our answers, when things that go on forever and ever, then we say that they're going to infinity. So we do have our little symbol for infinity, and we always put parentheses around that. Brackets. Brackets are going to be used if you have a closed circle, or if you have a solid line that it's going to hit. And then the last type we have, I call these braces. And braces are going to be used if there's just a point on the graph, or if you have a vertical or horizontal line. So our first example, we're just going to start with x and y intercepts. So remember, here's the x-axis. And if I look at the graph, I notice that it goes through the x-axis at 3 different points. So when I'm writing them, I'm going to write it with the farthest one on the left to the right. So that would be at -3. And then 2. And the last one is going to be at +3. Then the y-intercept crosses the y-axis. And on this one, it should only cross in one spot. And I have that crossing at the number 9. So hopefully that part's review for you. So let's get into the majority of this lesson, which is going to be talking about domain and range and how to tell if something's a function. So remember, domain is x numbers. So what I would do is I would take my pencil and I would put it on the very edge of my graph, and then I would move it in until I hit my graph. And the very first time I'm going to hit my graph on the left side would be up there at the top with the arrows. And the arrows means that it's going to go on forever and ever. So we're on the left side, that's -infinity. You always put parentheses around infinities, whether it's positive or negative. And then we'll do the same thing on the right. So on the right side, put your pencil all the way on the edge of the graph, follow it till it touches my graph. And once again, you're going to notice that it's going to touch at an arrow. And we're on the right side, so it's going to positive infinity. And remember, parentheses around infinity. So now for the range, Range is y numbers, so we're going to start at the bottom. So I'm going to start at the bottom of my graph and move my pencil all the way up, and the very first time I hit it is going to be at the y number 2. And that's a solid line, and around solid lines we put a bracket. Now at the top, if I start at the top of my screen and I come down, doesn't matter which way I look at it, I'm going to hit at an arrow again. So if I'm hitting at an arrow, that means infinity, and it's positive because we're going up, and put parentheses around that. Now, if I scroll back up here, how do we tell if something's a function? And it says, to tell if a graph is a function, we're going to use what we call a vertical line test. And if you draw a vertical line through your picture and it only touches your picture once, then it is a function. If your vertical line touches your picture more than once, it is not. So on this one, no matter where I draw a vertical line, it's only going to touch my picture one time. So yes, it is a function. So let's look at our next example. So once again, for the domain, we're going to start on the left side and work my way in. And the very first time I'm going to hit is going to be at the y number. Oops, sorry. Okay, so the very first time it hits, sorry, I think I said y, but I meant x. The x number is going to be at -3, and that's a solid line, so we're going to put a bracket around it. And then if we come in from the right side, and the very first time I'm going to hit my shape is going to be at the x number of 4. And once again, solid line, so bracket. So now for the range, let's go from the bottom. So if I go from the bottom, I come up. The very first time I'm going to hit it is going to be at the y number of -2. And then I'm going to put a bracket around it because it's a solid line. So now we're going to start at the top and work our way down. And once again, we're going to hit at a solid line, and that's going to be at the y number of 4, and bracket because solid line. Now, if we're trying to tell a function on this one, whenever I draw a vertical line through it, you're going to notice that it touches the picture twice. So this one is not a function. Okay, on C. For C, start on the left side and follow it in till it hits your graph. And you're going to notice the very first spot I hit my graph is at a open circle. Open circle means parentheses, and that x number is -1. On the right side, if I follow it in, the very first place I'm going to hit it is going to be at that arrow. And arrow means infinity, and we always put parentheses around infinity. And it's positive because we're on the right side. Now for the range, I'm going to start at the bottom, work my way up, and I'm going to hit it at this open circle. But what is the y number for that open circle? And that is 0. And once again, we put a parentheses around open circles. And then on the top, if I start on the top and I come down, once again, the very first place I'm going to hit it is at an arrow. So that's positive infinity because we're going up, and parentheses around it. So now, is it a function? Well, draw a vertical line, and no matter where you draw the vertical line, it only touches once. So yes, it is a function. Okay, D. If we look at D, on the left side, we're coming in, and the very first time I hit it is going to be at an arrow. So that's going to be -infinity because we're on the left with the parentheses. On the right, when I come in, the very first time I'm going to hit it is at that open circle closed circle. And that closed circle is at 6. And we're going to have a bracket around it. So now for the range, we're starting at the bottom, working our way up. And I hit at this dot, which has the Y number of 0. And that's solid, so make sure you put a bracket around it. And at the top, when I come down, the very first time I'm going to hit it is going to be at that arrow. And that arrow means going on forever, so infinity. And we always put parentheses around that. Does it pass a vertical line test? Well, no matter where you draw a vertical line, it's only going to cross it one time. So yes, it does. Pause the video and take a minute and you try E for me. And then I'll put the answers off to the side. So take a minute and take a look at your answers. If you got them, fantastic. If you did not, please star it so that you can remember to ask a question about it. Okay, 2 more examples we're going to talk about. We do have some special cases that will happen. And on F, one of the special cases is that you are going to have either a horizontal or a vertical line. So for the domain, we're still going to be coming in on the left side. And the very first time I hit it is at that open circle. And the X number for that is 0. So my domain is parentheses 0. If I come in on the right side, I'm going to hit it at an arrow. So that means positive infinity, and always put parentheses around infinity. Range. Well, if it's a vertical or a horizontal line, in our case, since it's horizontal, that means there's only going to be one Y number. And the one Y number that this line is going through is 4. And then remember, we put the little braces around it. Now, if it passes the vertical line test, let's check it out. No matter where I put it, it only touches once, so yes, it does. And then our last special case, this one is going to be where there are just random dots on your graph. There's no lines connecting them or anything like that. For the domain, what you have to do is you have to go through and tell me the X number for every single one of those dots. And since those dots are just random dots and not connected, you have to have the braces around it. So my first one over here is at -8. Remember to go left to right. Then we have one at -3. And then we're looking at 2. Then 5. Kind of run out of space, so I'm going to write it below. And then our last one is at 7. Now the range, same thing. Just go through and tell me the Y number for each one of those dots. So my Y numbers are going to be at -5, then -2, then at 0. And then the last 2 dots, they share the same Y number, so you really only have to write it down once. But if you forget it and write it down twice, that's okay. Now, does it pass the vertical line test? Well, the only way it would fail is if there was 2 dots right underneath each other and they were both closed. But none of our dots have another one underneath of them. So to answer our question, yes, it is a function. So hope this helps. If you have any more questions, please let me know. Thank you.